he was a very good doctor. He didn't often make mistakes. He was as good as most of the doctors nowadays. And he was as good as a consultant. He didn't often need consultants, but when he had them in, but very often he'd confirm his own diagnosis.
Alexander Uchard Webster was born on his father's farm, the mill of Achentull, near Abershirder, far better kent as Foggy Lawn. He was born there in 1885. He joined the practice of Dr. Louis Beattie in the Broch in 1911, but in 1914 he served with the Medical Corps in France and was awarded the Military Cross for distinguished service. He was captured, and while a POW, he drank watered down soup out of his tin helmet. He once said, "We were underfed and hungry, and hungry men are hungry men, so we were disgruntled and a time bomb ready to explode." Once on returning from a visit in France, a customs officer remarked, "Oh, I see you come from Fraserburgh. You know, we used to send missionaries up there." The abrupt reply from Dr. Webster was, "I know that very well. We ate them." Dr. Beattie was a brother of Beattie of Banks and Strichen, and Jean Courtney, who was a table maid there, never forgot that every Sunday Dr. Webster came up and had his dinner at Beattie's. And she said, "I thought an awful lot of him, because he was quiet, well-mannered, and he spoke like a Levos." And Jean's husband, Dode, was a cattleman at Beattie of Banks, and he had war wounds during the 1914-18 war. Dr. Webster had a look at his wounds from time to time. A farm servant he'd been out seeing, it hadn't been off a wheel, and he'd been out this time to give him a last visit to check him over, and said to him, "In fit like are you today now, are you feeling any better?" And the farm servant says, "Oh, hi, I'm feeling bra, doctor." Dr. Webster peered over his horn-rimmed glasses and said, Well, stick on your tuckety beats and take another day off." Dr. Webster's a right good man, says Jean Courtney. Her husband Dode was wounded several times in the First War, and as soon as he came out on a Sunday morning at 3 o'clock, was a Sunday morning he came out at 3, and you kent he was coming by the sound and the roar of his motorbike. And because his wounds were badly infected, Dr. Webster took him away in his motorbike and got his wounds properly treated and healed up before he took him back home again. He was a right good man, Dr. Webster. Of course, weather didn't make no difference to Dr. Webster at all. There was once a woman off an air wheel out at Lunby, and the roads were all heaped up with snow. So he says, "I ken somebody that'll take me out there." And the man was Baldy Henderson at Rosarty. And Baldy came out, and the two of them were seen shuffling snow, digging the car out, until they finally got to this craft at Lunby and saw the woman and got her all sorted up before they come back home again. And the crafter spoke about that for years and years later. He was never held back by storms. Now we need a word for his good friend, Professor Alan Downie, for I kent him for many years. Alan had been a patient at Dr. Webster's, and also after medical school and after being risen to professorship, they became good friends.
Dr. Anderson, Dr. Greg Anderson, a consultant physician, told me that over many years, when he had seen patients in consultation with Webster on many occasions, they had disagreed and had diagnosed only 3 times. And on one of these occasions, Dr. Webster was right and Dr. Anderson, the physician, was wrong. Well, that's merely an indication of his quality as a doctor. He was very good. I thought he was very good indeed. He diagnosed my father's fatal illness when it wasn't very obvious what it was. And he once, when I had a motor bicycle accident and broke my collarbone, and he came to see me the next day, and he insisted I go to Aberdeen and have my shoulder x-rayed to see how this was. and also to have my head x-rayed again as well, had a bruise in my temple. And I didn't have my head x-rayed because it was very awkward with a broken arm to get. And the radiologist didn't insist. When Dr. Webster knew that we were very difficult not having head x-rayed, and he was quite right because it was x-rayed a fortnight later and with a crack in the skull was fractured. And he thought it might be. But I think that he was, his quality as a doctor, he was very good. I thought he was very good indeed. He had no hobbies, unfortunately. No. Nothing much in the way of hobbies. His work was his hobby, I think. Medicine was his hobby. And he wasn't a great believer in sport. He was always too conscious of the damage that could result from sport, like broken legs or broken collarbones and playing football and so on. And he wasn't a great sportsman himself. He wasn't, I think, very enthusiastic about sport. He never played golf, as far as I know.
His wife said he was a great reader.
Oh yes, he was a great reader. And he kept up to date with things too. He kept up to date. He was very good. He used to, but he had one thing he told me once. He said that after a good few years in practice, he learned not to believe all that was written. As he said, he was taught as a student that people with cancer died quickly. And this, he found from experience, was far from it. And he quoted to me 2 instances of people in the village whom I knew with cancer. And one of them was still alive after 15 years. And that patient hadn't been operated on either. The other one had been alive for 10 years and was still apparently fairly fit. You know, they still had the cancer, but hadn't died of it. Well, I think a good deal depends on the kind of cancer that you have. Some forms of cancer don't kill quickly. Some do. Cancer of the stomach do. And cancer of the lung usually do. But there are other types of cancers which may take rather a prolonged course.
Dr. Webster, in conversation do you think it was more medical things that you like to speak about his work and that sort of?
Oh yes. He often spoke to me about cancer, but on things and things that were new advances in medicine. You know, he'd ask what I knew about them, what I thought about them. But he once called me to suggested to me I should go and see a farm servant up in the country. This boy had a little lump in the back of his leg, and he thought it was a particular type of tumour which I knew about. He asked me if I'd go and see it, to see what I thought, and my brother, because if it was what he thought it was, it meant amputating the boy's leg, about the knee, and he thought it was a particular type of tumour. My twin brother, was there with me. He and I went and saw the boy, and with no doubt, he had no doubt, he'd seen some cases of this sort at hospitals in Sheffield. He'd no doubt it was the tumour that Webster thought it was. But he had it confirmed. He sent the boy into Aberdeen, and they cut out a piece of the tumour and examined it. It was exactly as he said it was, and the boy did everything had been amputated. About the knee, but I don't know what happened to him after that. You know, Dr. Webster, he didn't miss much.
No. And if he'd been your family doctor, then you knew him in quite a young age.
Oh yes, yes.
When did you start to become friends with him? Really?
Oh well, I didn't qualify, you see, until 1923. So that up till then I was not medical, but after 1923 when I qualified, then I was a doctor, and I was doing research mostly, and he often discussed with me, or medical with me. But he attended my father, he attended the family for all of his life and practice. He was our family doctor, so he attended my father, and he attended my mother, he attended all the family. I think oh yes, that's right. I remember when my sister had diphtheria, he came and injected. I think he injected with antitoxin. I can't remember about that. I can't be sure about that, but that was a long time ago. That's when I was a kid. But I had a brother-in-law who was a layman. He was married to my sister, and he was a soldier throughout the First War, and he'd been in the 5th Gardens, and he survived the war. He was in France most of the war, and he was a great raconteur. And one day Webster came in and he asked this brother-in-law, mine, Archat was his name, asked Archat about his experiences. And Jimmy Archat started to talk about experiences he had in France. Most of them were very humorous. He only told us about the lighter side of transport of the war in France. And Webster sat and listened to him for about an hour and a half because he was a very good talker. And Webster had been in France, and he knew some of the areas that Archat had talked about, and he'd been in some of the, he'd been near some of the, engaged in some of the battles that Archat had been engaged in. And he went back after the war, long after the war, he went back to France to see some of the battlefields. I saw him mostly when he came to the village, and I'd meet him in the square and would sit down in the chemist's window and chat for a while, you know. Because he was never in such a hurry, he hadn't time for a gossip. I remember my father's last illness. He had a condition called subacute bacterial endocarditis, which is a fatal infection. It was a fatal infection then, it wouldn't be now with penicillin, the cure, even curing penicillin. There's no penicillin then. And that was the diagnosis that Webster made when he was ill. He was quite ill. I was not in time. I came back the weekend to see him, and I saw Dr. Webster, and I thought he'd had bad cold, and he had sort of low-grade pneumonia, and but then he was running a temperature and running a fever. He wasn't too well, he was pretty sick. And I asked Dr. Rose what he thought it was. He said he thought it was subacute bacterial endocarditis. And I said, oh well, oh, you think so? Well, I better do a blood culture and check on it, see. Take some blood and do a culture. If it is that condition, the culture shows, confirms it. And Webster said, oh well, you can praise yourself, Alan. He said, that's what he's got. And he was right.
So he's an extremely efficient man in that
ideas. Yes, very good. Because it's not a condition that easy to diagnose, it's very often missed.
So there must have been something extraordinary about him as well. Yeah, if he was able to sort of diagnose things like that.
Oh yes, he was very good.
It would be
no, he was a very good doctor. He didn't often make mistakes. He was as good as most of the doctors in Aberdeen. And he was as good as a consultant. He didn't often need consultants, but when he had them in, but very often when he'd confirm his own diagnosis.
He was a man who must have been immense, a very strong character.
Oh yes, he was a strong character. He was very keen on the BMA, British Medical Association. I think he was the local representative on the British Medical Association, for the British Medical Association for some years. He won.
Yes.
And also, he could tell you a lot more about Webster because they were both practitioners in Aberdeenshire, so they met and they often they're on the BMA together, they're on committees and so on, so they met each other fairly often. So he would know a good deal about Webster in his later years.